Chapter 9. As they traveled south, the landscape changed from the lush forest and meadows of Jarbidge to high desert. Neither of them spoke about what had happened in Jarbidge, both relieved to put it behind them. Ivy resolved to study her copies of The Woman Rebel more carefully so she could prevent getting pregnant. She was so grateful that a brave woman like Margaret Sanger had the courage to publish information that women really needed. Water changed from sweet brooks to water so muddy they couldn't see the bottom. They strained out the tadpoles and wrigglers as best they could with cheesecloth, but it left a prickly taste on the back of the throat. As they drove through sage country, there were swarms of tiny, biting gnats, especially after a rain shower. But the most troubling thing as they passed through the open rangelands were the frequent pyres of burning cattle and sheep carcasses fueled by sagebrush. The smell was greasy and sharp. Vultures gathered, eating out the eyes of dead beasts while waiting for coyotes to tear open the unburned carcasses so they could consume their tender innards. Where there was fencing, turkey carcasses were wired up as coyote bait. Vultures hopped along the fence line, keeping a wary eye on Raider and Ivy as they drove by. Whatever was on the land was affecting the wild things, too. Decaying carcasses of skunk and coyote lay in ditches along the washboard roads. Pulling into McGill, a prosperous copper company town and ranch, Raider turned the Ford in for some preventive maintenance. A middle-aged woman in greasy blue overalls shook his hand. "Howdy," she said, with a strong grip. "What can we do for you?" Raider left her directions as Ivy studied the woman. She was confident, but not beautiful, tanned and leathery, with strong hands and an honest face. "All right then, Dr. Thompson. We'll have it ready for you in a couple hours." Ivy admired her for making her way in a traditional man's business and her no-nonsense attitude. She especially appreciated that here was a woman using her skill and hard work instead of feminine wiles to earn her living. This was the kind of woman who should have the vote. They left and walked to the new McGill drugstore for provisions. Raider restocked some of his medical supplies, and Ivy purchased headache powders. She seemed to get sick headaches more regularly now, but today was a good day. Raider had struck up a conversation with the clerk about the local news. "Yes, sir. The epidemic has been going on a few months now. Started in the early spring. Even got a few head down here at the ranch." Ivy looked at Raider. "What epidemic?" "Rabies," he replied starkly. "Nervous?" she asked. "How bad is it?" Raider didn't respond. The clerk tried to reassure her. "No use borrowing trouble, ma'am. No one's got sick yet." Thanking the clerk, they took a walk around town. There were beautiful homes, and Ivy dreamed that she could have a home like this of her own one day. The town was clean and prosperous. The green fields of McGill Ranch were restful to the eye. They both were a little sorry to leave, but their next stop was Pioche, where Raider had been assured there was some good work to pick up. The night was warm, so Raider decided to get a little further down the road, even though the sun was setting. With his headlights, they could see almost as well as day. They drove through Ely, eating a picnic dinner on the go of fried chicken and biscuits and fresh buttermilk. Raider was in such a good mood that he began singing to Ivy. "Everybody loves a baby, and that's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, won't you come and let me rock you in my cradle of love? And we'll cuddle all the time. Oh, I want a loving baby, and it might as well be you. Pretty baby of mine." Ivy had almost forgotten how Raider used to sing to her. She loved it because he always seemed to control himself. But there was that fun and playful side to him that she adored. Clapping and laughing, she called out, "Encore! Encore!" But before he could begin again, an unearthly shriek followed by a deep growl pierced the night. "Ivy, quick, the rifle!" He grabbed it from her, stopping the car and shooting all within seconds. A cougar had jumped at them from behind. Ivy screamed, feeling the huge cat leap over the hood, brushing by her. In a second, she heard a thump and saw it lying dead on the hood. "Oh my God, Raider!" He quickly got out and shot it again, just to be certain. Thankfully, he was a great shot and had quick reflexes. "Are you all right?" she asked him shakily. Raider looked at the cat over carefully, then shoved it into the ditch with a thump. "Why did it attack us?" "There was foam in its mouth," he told her. She knew it was rabid. Without a word, they both quickly got back in the car and drove through much of the night to Geyser Ranch. Ranches were often the only oasis of civilization in the West, a place where folks could resupply, pick up mail, or pay for a bed. Ivy and Raider were grateful for the safe, clean shelter and threw themselves into bed without even undressing. After 4 hours of sleep, Raider was getting up, changed, and cleaned. "Raider, you have a scratch on your shoulder." It wasn't deep, but it was wide. Ivy got out the surgical cotton and Dr. Tickner's antiseptic to clean the cut. Did this come from the cat, she asked. Hell, I don't know, Raider snapped. But there's no point worrying about it. I don't see how it could be anyway. I got that cat plenty fast. Irritated, he spun around while she was trying to treat him. Stop fussing, woman. Calmly, Ivy replied, I was just trying to help. Honey, I know, I'm sorry, Raider apologized. I know you are, but let's just get going, okay? She knew he must be worried because he was not normally one to apologize or show weakness of any kind. The morning sparkled. Patches of green grass amidst dusty log corrals with restless wild horses waiting to be broken for ranch work. Ivy loved the horses. She had seen them on far ridges on their trip, but never this close up. Strong and proud, several bore bite marks and scars from fights and injuries on the range, just like the cowboys who were already hard at work. She paused a moment, admiring the sensual power of both the horses and the young cowboys, as if they were one mythical creature. Raider gathered her up, and they ate a hearty ranch breakfast of ham slabs, biscuits, scalding black coffee, and fried eggs. There was also a special treat of hot apple pie served with a slice of cheese. Hope you'll come back this way, Dr. Thompson. There's several of us who could use a good dentist, said the cook, refreshing Raider's coffee with a black-toothed smile. Raider was an anomaly, a professional and honest man, willing to go out to the common man. He was accorded respect wherever he went. Ivy appreciated that. As his wife, respect overflowed to her. At least she would never be mistaken for a working girl as long as she was with him. A wife was especially prized and honored in this still Wild West, where educated and cultured women were so rare. As usual, there was no discussion of any unpleasantness, so they drove in silence, pretending not to think about Raider's scratch. Approaching Pioche, they zigzagged down the 17% grade into town. Like some kind of a weird road marker, there was a pile of white stones stacked in the midst of scorched earth, charred sage, and twisted metal. One stone was painted, "There but for the grace of God go I." Apparently some poor soul had not negotiated the last turn into Pioche, the town claiming yet another life. McGill had been so clean and orderly, but Pioche was not. A rough town with a reputation for violence, 72 men had been murdered before one had died of natural causes. But that had been more than 40 years ago in its prime. Now it was a slow tin and silver town, way past its heyday. Setting up shop in the 3-story Mountain View Hotel, Ivy enjoyed the verandas with rocking chairs and a sweeping view. She really did love this country. West Virginia had always felt claustrophobic to her, but here she felt so free. Raider bought her a $30 Kodak Brownie box camera in Pioche as an extravagant gesture of apology and love. He would never admit when he was wrong, but he wouldn't hesitate to buy her things to show his appreciation. She began to take pictures in Pioche as she posted flyers and drummed up business. Stopping at the Thompson Opera House, she was intrigued by the poster. Come and see the exotic scarf dancer from Calcutta as she sheds 100 veils. Ivy was always torn by her visceral jealousy warring with her broad-mindedness and curiosity at open sexuality on display. Miners fresh in, dog-dirty, and loaded for bear were gathering at the Alamo Bar, also known in the bad old days as the Bucket of Blood. Ivy coolly ignored the catcalls and whistles as she posted their flyer. Heading back to the Mountain View, she saw a small burro, legs splayed out on the ground like some poor squash bug, its load just too great to bear, wearing a flowered hat. A small woman in oversized man shirt and frayed pants was urging her little burro to get up. Trampo! Come on, old friend, just a little further. The woman produced a little sugar, which Trampo gladly ate and stayed firmly planted in the dirt. Disgusted, she abandoned the beast and headed into the Silver Cafe. Moments later, she came out with a cup of coffee and poured it down the burro's throat. Miraculously, Trampo arose as from the dead, and the two strode on down the dirt road towards parts unknown. Ivy just had to laugh. She felt like she was in the middle of a crazy play or a crazier dream. After dinner, Ivy and Raider sat on their second-floor porch, Raider smoking his briar pipe, the sweet smell of Prince Albert tobacco filling the air. Ivy loved the masculine smell of pipe smoke, and for a second she felt lonely for Papa. The stars were brilliant, twinkling red and blue and yellow. Singing had commenced at the Alamo, echoing off the mountainside. Raider had an itch to play some poker with the local boys. Always restless, he needed to be moving on. If he couldn't move on, he made money, and if he couldn't make money, he found something to do. Tonight, he let Ivy tag along. The Alamo was filled with clouds of cigar smoke, a tinny piano, and an energetic black man playing the Searchlight Rag. Saloons were the community gathering places for dancing, news, poetry exhibition, and, of course, gambling. In the East, there were schoolhouses, churches, or the Grange. In these Western towns, bars were all these things rolled together into one rowdy, happy place. Ivy wondered what Pioche was like in its crazy days, if this was considered subdued. Rader sat at a table where an older woman with white hair, dressed in man's clothing, and an enormous black cigar was dealing poker. Her hands were sure and deft, eyes a twinkling blue. She had a kind, round face like any grandmother, except she was here in Pioche instead of making cookies for the church bazaar. Like a waltz with changing partners, players of the game came and went. Rader stayed a few hands, won a little money, then went to buy a drink. Ivy was fascinated by this woman. The older woman seemed pleased to meet another lady who wasn't one of the usual soiled doves, so the dealer excused herself and invited Ivy to have dinner with her at a back table. Like any woman, she liked a good visit. Rader joined them, listening to her story. Poker Alice had loved and learned her trade starting as a teenager in the Colorado mining camps. She'd been widowed several times and always came back to playing or dealing cards to make her own living. Ivy listened to the heartbreak of this woman who had lost so much to love and the determination to care for herself and her children. It made Ivy sad to see such an amazing woman work so hard just to survive. Nodding towards Ivy, she said in the slightest English accent, "You're such a pretty thing. I used to wear the finest fashions until I got old and fat." She touched Ivy's braided travel jacket, one of her few nice things. "At my age, I suppose I should be knitting, but I'd rather play poker with 5 or 6 experts than eat. Figure I've made up to $250,000 in my days and never cheated. And," she added proudly, "I never gamble on Sundays." Rader and Ivy looked at each other, wondering how long it would take them to earn that, even by being an itinerant dentist, even if they did work on Sundays. While Rader went to collect their coats, Poker Alice caught Ivy by the arm. "Listen, little one, you need to be more careful than you think. You're real lucky to have a husband. But if he's gone one day, there's plenty of men to take what you have, if you know what I mean." Alice exhaled a blue cloud of smoke, then became even more serious. "You wouldn't be the first girl out here to end up being gang raped and traded around like some squaw. Heard of a squaw who threw her baby in the river after her man walked out? You stay with your man and be a good girl." And Ivy shivered, remembering Omaha. "I know what it's like to be on top of the world when you're all pretty and such, but that doesn't last forever. You won't get into trouble if you read and follow the good book like I have. I have never gone hungry, and I've never been ashamed." They left Pioche the following morning, headed south, and Alice's words were heavy on Ivy's mind as they passed the Boot Hill Cemetery. A half-constructed ore tram dangled over the cemetery's Murderer Row, marked by plain wood posts instead of crosses. Ivy caught a glimpse of a white stone lamb that marked a child's grave resting under the wings of a marble angel. A deep, racking sob suddenly escaped her. Weeping uncontrollably, she could hardly breathe, let alone tell Rader what was happening. She didn't even know herself. He tried to comfort her, stopping the car to let her out. She paced in circles, trying to regain composure. Finally, she was spent and got back in the car with no explanation. Rader wondered if she were becoming mentally unstable. She had always seemed a steady girl, but he had to wonder what the future held.